Welcome to Career in Ruins, where we are still just an award-nominated podcast.
It hurts a bit, doesn't it?
It stings a bit, but it's fair enough when you see the level of competition that we went up against.
I think that's right. When we were sitting in that majestic room in what university we were in?
Queen's University Belfast.
That's the one. When we were in that lovely dining hall, surrounded by the glorious portraits of eminent professors and all of the lovely architecture and decoration, surrounded by arguably the best and the best of archaeology across the discipline. It was quite humbling, and fair enough, we didn't win really.
Yeah. It's nice to be in the mix.
It was lovely.
We had a cracking time otherwise.
What a time. I had my first ever pint of Guinness.
You had more than one, did you? Maybe.
I had 1.5 and realised that that's about it for me, I think.
You need to be converted, pal. It's a lovely, easy drink.
Easy's a tricky word. It's definitely a drink.
Yeah, but lovely trip nonetheless, and great to hang out with our pals at Strapmates, and go to the Titanic Museum and the National Museum, and drink whiskey and cocktails and Guinness and play shuffleboard. You and I, we won the inaugural shuffleboard championship between Strapmates and Career in Ruins.
I mean, never mind the Council for British Archaeology Awards. I think the real victory, the genuine victory, the one that will live with me for many, many years to come, is us winning our first ever shuffleboard championship against Strapmates.
Yeah, and I'd hazard a guess, and this, I might be wrong here, the one and only shuffleboard championships.
You see, I don't know. I was thinking a lot about shuffle today, and there is a board not very far from where I work, in the go-karting place where we had a bit of fun. So I think we could very easily find ourselves having a rematch in the near future.
You saying a match once a month?
Deal.
Okay, nice. How you been otherwise, mate? You been keeping busy?
Good. Yeah, I'm still recovering a bit from the weekend in Belfast, if I'm honest. It was a jolly good one, but I can't say I slept all that much. Loved the Titanic exhibition. That was so good. Initially, I'll be honest, it did a good job of expectation management, that museum, I think, because you walk in and for about 20 minutes we were learning about rivets, and
wasn't that riveting?
I was going to make that pun. And as riveting as that wasn't, from that moment on, it was all uphill, and I found actually some of it quite touching. Particularly the giant wall of names was quite a touching moment, and finding people who shared our surname was an interesting one.
Yeah, the Pitmans made it. They were obviously an upper class. The Shaws, not Henry Shaw, not so lucky.
Well, I've done a bit of research on the Pitman that made it, and he was like third in charge. He was one of the bigwigs. He was a sailor. Yeah, lots of transcripts at the Titanic inquiry. It's good to know government inquiries were still going on back then. But yeah, really interesting. But no, I'm all right. I've had a fun week of it, I'd say. I got to do a bit of South Todaying, which is, for our international audiences, the eminent Southern news channel for the South Central
Regional
District.
News for BBC. Everyone knows BBC. Regional News.
Yeah. And it's. I mean, South Today is a very respected, very respected organisation. But it was lovely. They came out to Poole Museum, where, as regular listeners will know, we did a little documentary recently that went out at the weekend. And they came down, chatted to the crew, chatted to the team, chatted to the museum folks, and chatted to me a little bit. And the chap doing it, a chap called Patrick, put together a fantastic edited piece for the news. And it was really nice to see all of Bournemouth's work, all of the museum's work, and indeed Time Team and our work kind of up there.
So that was for the mortar wreck.
Yes, yeah. So the
Nice.
Mortar Wreck documentary that you and I hosted, and it went out at the weekend, and it seems to be doing all right. Lots of lovely comments on there. So if any Career in Ruins listeners haven't checked it out yet, go and have a look. Get your comments on there. Make sure you tell all those Time Team fans to tune into us. But it was great. But really, South Today is one thing. But you've been doing something a little bit more national, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, last 2 weeks have been absolutely crazy with a finale of flying to Belfast, getting to Belfast and flying and having a terrible flight and landing and then going round again and feeling particularly unwell. And then sitting through the awards. But yeah, work's been busy. We've had a climate change conference at Western Burt, the National Arboretum, looking at species and resilience and sort of species selection for parks and gardens going into the future in a warming and changing climate. Had a great week, 2 days in the New Forest with all our historic environment advisors, which was an absolute pleasure, talking all things forestry, archaeology and management. But in between all of that, yeah, I went out with BBC Proper Mate, BBC One, and their flagship program, Country File.
I thought you were going to say their flagship program, Strictly Come Dancing.
Well, I never heard of it. Any good?
It's all right.
And they are revisiting their Stonehenge special. So they did one a few years back, and they were looking at the sort of advancements in knowledge and understanding of Stonehenge since they last visited. And they wanted to visit Westwoods, which is one of my favourite woodlands. It's in Wiltshire near Marlborough. And there's been some brilliant work, which I won't go into too much detail for a reason you'll find out very soon. Some great research around the Quarry site or the Sarsen stones that are found at Westwoods, and they're linked to Stonehenge. So I had a lovely afternoon mincing around the forest and talking to Joe, the presenter, and generally enjoying myself.
Oh, so you've gone national. That's decent.
Yeah, should be right. Should be right. I hope I've done it justice.
So what's this Stonehenge you speak?
Well, we've got a great guest today, Derek, who could probably do a better job of explaining it than I can. It's the fantastic Professor David Nash, who is a physical geographer with teaching and research interests in the interface in geomorphology. Sorry, I just am terrible at reading. I'll keep going.
That's easy for you to say.
This gets harder. Climatology, history and archaeology. And his current leading two main areas of research, this is where it gets really a bit of a mouthful, is understanding the chemical properties in silica cemented duricrust, Silcrete, and using that knowledge to study areas like South Africa, Stonehenge and Avebury, and also establishing patterns of climate variability in Southern Africa over the last 200 to 300 years. David, welcome to Career in Ruins.
Thanks ever so much. Thanks for the welcome.
Apologies, I massively stumbled over that. This is the issue, is having dyslexic doing
you massacred that. But
as is tradition. But I'm hoping you'll be able to bring our listeners and viewers up to a better standard of understanding than I have done that. But welcome to the podcast, David. It's so great to have you with us. The podcast has a pretty standard format. And the first question we like to do is ask our participants to tell us how you got to being professor at University of Brighton, and what came before that.
Oh, that's a long history. I'll try to sort of sum up there. I did my undergraduate degree I did a geology and physical geography degree at the University of Sheffield, because I was always interested in kind of rocks and places. I suppose, really. I was that kind of shared interest as a kid. I loved dinosaurs, and I really got into geology. And I studied at Sheffield, and towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I was thinking, well, actually, I might want to go into research now. So I chatted to the guy who became my PhD supervisor, a guy called Dave Thomas, who's now at Oxford, and he had a project to go to the Kalahari Desert, basically in Botswana, to try to figure out how, in that case, fossil drainage had come to be. So looking at ancient drainage lines and trying to figure out when they were active and when they dried out. And I obviously, the chance to go and spend a chunk of time in Botswana, I jumped at it. And I had a fantastic total of 9 months out in Botswana, driving around in a very old Toyota Land Cruiser. Part of what I did while I was out there trundling around was I was looking at the rock types that you massacred at the beginning. So I was particularly interested in a type of stone called Silcrete that you mentioned. And Silcrete is what in the UK we refer to as Sarsen. So I was really looking at it and trying to figure out kind of how it formed, what its chemistry was like, how it varied from place to place. And I guess really that's where the link through into archaeology comes in, because I went to a conference in Botswana. I've only ever been to one conference in Botswana, but this was a really interesting one, and it was a real kind of multidisciplinary one. And they had everybody there who were working on Kalahari environments, and there were people talking about cattle ranching and water resources and archaeology. And I gave a paper about Silcrete, and normally people sort of lapse into a coma when you start talking about Silcrete. But there was a woman right in the middle of the audience, not upright, scribbling away furiously, who turned out to be a woman from University of Oslo called Sheila Coulson, who I've been working with pretty much ever since. And I'll keep it short, but she was working on an archaeological site in a place called the Cedillo Hills. She'd found lots and lots. These are little Stone Age sites, so they're probably 100,000 years old. And she'd found lots and lots of Silcrete artifacts, but there wasn't any Silcrete for a good 100 kilometres in any direction. So she was saying, "Would you think we could figure out whereabouts this material came from?" And so I got a little bit of money through Brighton, and we did. We could figure out, we could use the chemistry to try to match the plate, the actual artifacts and the stone chippings from the stone tool making to the places in the landscape where people use stone as a raw material. So that's really where my link into archaeology came.
So that's geochemistry?
Yeah, so geochemistry. So it's kind of looking at you mentioned geomorphology, so it's looking at the landscape itself and trying to figure out whereabouts this stone is found and where it forms. And then we were looking at the chemistry of the stone itself. And it's just like it's like in forensics where people do fingerprinting. So you find a fingerprint on a window or something like that, and then you try to match the fingerprints of the person. Basically, you kind of find the chemical fingerprint of an artifact, and then try to see, can you find the rock outcrops that have identical chemistry to that?
Amazing. So that's using using a portable X-ray fluorescence machine?
We used for that a technique called ICP-MS, which is inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. Yeah,
I'm glad I didn't have to read that.
That's easy for me. Easy for me. Okay? But no. So what you do with that is you basically take the sample and you grind it to a very fine powder. And then it's analysed at way, way higher resolution than you would ever get from a portable instrument. You kind of need to do that because Silcrete is incredibly pure. It's pretty much, most of these are 95, 99% silica and not very much else. And what we're interested in is the tiny fraction that is in silica. So you need really high resolution methods in order to to figure these things out. Yeah, but that was we started doing that in 2011. I guess I've been working on projects involving Silcrete and archaeology ever since.
Fantastic. So that chance encounter in a conference sort of opened your world or opened you to the world of archaeology.
Yeah, hugely, and it's one of those. I mean, it's one of those things that in any career, I mean, chance plays such a big thing. I know I can look back over my career and think, just how there's encounters and meeting people, and plays such a big role, really.
So is it safe to say then, since 2011, this has been the focus of a lot of your research? Yes,
it has. Yeah. So we've carried on doing work in Botswana. So we worked on this one Middle Stone Age site in the Cedillo Hills. And I mean, in terms of what we found out there, I mean, we found that people were transporting rock about 295 kilometres before they were making tools with it. So these were people, and I know, which is mad. But this is people who were presumably, well, they presumably knew the quality of that material. They wanted a stone that would, you know, nap in the way that they'd like it to, so they could make tools. And perhaps they didn't necessarily know what they would find when they got to where they were going. Or maybe they knew that that material wasn't there, so they brought it with them. Now, I've got another colleague who does refitting work, you know, where you basically take all of the debris from the napping of the stone and then put it back together like a 3D jigsaw. And I don't know how people have got the patience to do that. She was able to identify that people were transporting things probably up to the size of a big grapefruit. So they were taking quite big chunks of stone and probably multiple blocks of it and carrying it. Yeah, well, we don't know whether they were carrying it directly themselves or whether there was trade involved, but they were definitely getting it from, you know, getting on 200 miles and then taking it and using it to make tools.
I always love the idea of sort of imagining prehistoric people, rather than sort of carrying around a pre-made toolkit, just getting their Swiss Army stone and taking it with them where they were going, and then getting whatever tools out of it they need when they get there. That's such an interesting thing.
And we
imagine.
knew that they were bringing raw lumps of stones. They didn't do a lot of prep work to tidy it up. They were carrying lumps with all the crud on the outside of it, and then chipping away, making a lot of mess. Making a lot of mess that we could analyse. Yeah.
Derek, how do you feel about this? So Derek does a lot of work with XRF and geochemical analysis, but metallurgy predominantly. Have you ever stuck one on a stone?
I'll be honest, I have, but I'm always jealous of the stone folks, because the worst thing about metallurgy, let's say, maybe not the worst, but the challenging thing about metallurgy is people seem to insist on melting it down all the time and changing its chemistry, whereas the people out there zapping stone or plasmatising, that's not a word, plasmatising stone, it doesn't change chemically from raw material to finished artifacts. So I'm not saying it's easier, but it's a different challenge.
It's different, isn't it? Yeah. And I suppose it can change, because if this stuff's been sitting underground for a long while, it will weather a little bit. So you have to be careful that the outside hasn't changed. But we normally get around that by removing the outside, you know, so that you can be fairly happy that you're getting the interior of the rock. So we've done other projects along those lines. In now I think we've looked at about 7 or 8 different sites. We're currently working on kind of trying to piece all the results together to, you know, see how people move through landscapes, which is just a wonderful thing to think, you know, 100,000 years ago, you know, where people have been. That's the lovely thing about it. You know, they've been there.
I think that there's nothing better than being able to look at artifacts and be able to understand the bigger landscape narrative. And I think I'm quite biased in this. I'm often quite uninterested with individual artifacts. So they can tell us about the people here and at that point, but it's not. I want to know about the landscape. And actually, you're turning me round there, David. so presumably, then this chance encounter and this initial research has led on to you doing more work on Silcretes and Sarsens elsewhere.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't want to sort of second guess your second question, really. But yes, what it's done is that's really what led us to starting to do work on trying to figure out whereabouts Sarsens came from. I mean, I think once we realised that this technique could work, I mean, I started thinking fairly early on, actually, maybe we could use this in the UK. Maybe we could give it a go. And then as we publish more from Southern Africa, you know, that really, you get more confidence in it and you think, actually, this method could be a winner. We could actually do something with this. Yeah, so that's really what's then led on to more work in the UK. I've done work on Sarsens in the UK before, but very much looking at, again, at how they form and, you know, what's their chemistry like and all those kinds of things, rather than necessarily thinking about them in an archaeological.
So before we move on then to the pride question, which I think is going to be the crux of the bit of the career we're not talking about just yet. How are Sarsens formed?
Oh dear. How long have you got now? No, so basically what they are, I mean, if you think of them in their simplest form, they are quite simply sand that's cemented together by silica. And most of the UK ones are probably what we refer to as a groundwater silcrete. So they would have formed when sand was underground, and then it had solutions washing through it. It would have had silica washing through it in solution in the water. And then gradually over time, that silica kind of precipitates out, it crystallizes around the sand grains, and then slowly over time forms possibly a sheet of some kind. You imagine if you've got like near a water table, a big subsurface water table, and you've got sand there, you'll get cement occurring over a big sheet in the landscape. And then what's probably happened is that sheet's been broken up. And what we've got today is really the remnants, big boulders that are reflecting pockets of what was a Silcrete. Rather be, I don't know, it could be a big sheet, it could be a localized area of rock that's then broken up as the landscape's eroded. So as the chalk lands have kind of been eroded and all the valleys have cut through, you'd have had what was, solid layers of rock breaking up and then kind of migrating down slope. And if you've been around, I'm not sure whether you've seen the Sarsens in Wiltshire, out in some of the big valleys where there are stones. I mean, they're some of the most bizarre things ever, because you're in chalk downland and there's nothing there but chalk and flint. And then you've got these, honking great big boulders that make absolutely no sense in that landscape at all. But when you kind of realise that younger than the chalk, so after the chalk, there was quite a lot of sand deposited in those areas, and that's really the younger layers of the geology where the Sarsens have come from. Yeah, so they're a sandstone, but they're formed much more in a near surface environment than say your regular sandstone, where it's all cemented quite a considerable depth underground. But in the simplest form, they're a sandstone.
Brilliant. I think the one that really strikes me is not far from Westwoods. It's just north. It's a National Trust one, and you just got it's almost like a boulder field full of giant Sarsen stones just lying there on the on the ground.
There's Clatford Bottom. There's a very famous one at Clatford, and there's also a place called Lockridge Dean and Piggledene are probably some of the really nice ones. And they're a bit, people have used Sarsen stones in history, so there were more there, I would imagine, in the past, because if you go around Marlborough area, so many of the buildings are built of Sarsens, the farms, the walls. You would, wouldn't you? If you had nothing in the area but flint and chalk, you'd use the big boulders, wouldn't you, and break them up, use them for building stones. Yeah, so
fascinating. So before we get to the main question or next question of pride, one final follow-up question would be, how have you found that transition from focusing solely on geology and working with geology or geological academics to straying into the world of archaeology? Is it a quirkier world? Is there a difference? Are you enjoying it? Or
it's great. I mean, I've always loved doing interdisciplinary work. I think the thing that, because I think that some of the most interesting stuff happens when different disciplines kind of rub up against one another. So people aren't in their silos. They're trying to, you're starting to exchange ideas and exchange techniques. So I found it's been absolutely fascinating. It's interesting. I think that I think the archaeology community, certainly the people that I've met, have been absolutely kind of fantastic and fascinating and welcoming, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I think it's really interesting because it's really quite nice applying work that you've done and applying techniques, but actually doing it in a setting that's useful to another discipline. So what I've done, a lot of my work's been very pure science, if you want to think of it that way. It's been very kind of geological and how do these things form. But so actually being able to find uses for that is really enjoyable. Plus it's fun as well. You've got to have fun, haven't you? Setting out, trying to solve problems and try to tackle things that people don't know about, and we've got, long-standing questions is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, that's fantastic. One thing I'm tempted to ask you, but I might save it until we one day meet in a pub for a beer to ask, which is a more combative discipline? Who's the more kind of angsty and awkward? We'll leave that one for today.
I could answer that, but I won't.
So moving on then to the next question, David, because I'm very keen to hear your answer on this one. What in your career are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think I've kind of hinted at that earlier on, really. I mean, I think for me, and it's almost a no-brainer, really, in that the privilege, first of all, of being able to work at Stonehenge has been fantastic. Having kind of been there, known Stonehenge ever since I was a toddler. I mean, there are photographs of me somewhere with my mum sitting on, I guess it would be one of the fallen trilithons, and having a cup of tea when we're on holiday from, Essex to Dorset. So I've kind of known about Stonehenge. So actually being able to answer a problem about Stonehenge has been absolutely, fantastic. So I'd say absolutely. Being able to, and I'll be, frame this carefully, being able to identify the most likely source for the Sarsens. I don't think I'd ever say we found the source where the Sarsens come from, but certainly being able to say where the most likely source for them, majority of them is, I think has been an amazing thing, really. Definite career highlight. I'm hoping there'll be more career highlights, but that's definitely
it's a hard one to top, to be fair.
Yeah, it's decent. And on that particular highlight, the most likely place that Sarsens come from, I'm glad you're here tonight, because I've wanted to ask someone this for a while. Lawrence is forever claiming that he manages the origin of the Stonehenge Sarsens. Is he telling me fibs, or is it quite likely?
I would say on the basis of the evidence at the moment, it's most likely that Lawrence manages the area where the big Sarsen stones came from.
See,
we do know that there are at least two other areas where the big Sarsen stones came from, but we don't necessarily know exactly where they are. So there are, from the work that we did, there are 52 Sarsens left at Stonehenge at the moment, and 50 of them have a very coherent similar chemistry, so they probably came from the same place. That's likely to be West Woods. But there are two that are very different, both to the main cluster and to each other, and we don't have a clue where they're from.
You mentioned earlier that geology can change over time with weathering and things like that. How did historic England take it when you turned up to Stonehenge with a drill?
You see, we didn't. That was the thing. That's the beauty of this. So we turned up to Stonehenge with a portable XRF machine. Mm-hmm. That was the first thing we did. And basically, the only thing we were told is, when you're doing this, you do not touch the stones, and you do not touch the stones with the instrument, which is not easy.
Work, yeah.
It's not easy because each of the readings we did using the XRF takes about 2 minutes, and we did 52 stones, and we did each one 5 times. So I had a very stiff arm by the end of doing this work. I mean, we did it over, what did we do? It was over about five visits. So we did 4 night shifts, because again, we weren't allowed in to do the work when it was open to the public. The monument's open to the public, which is fair enough, because I don't think, you're paying your money to see Stonehenge. You don't want to see people with hard hats and high-vis doing chemical measurements on. It's not good on Instagram, I'd imagine.
So, I don't know. It's not mine.
Yeah. So that's what they were most concerned about, really, at the time. Was it's because, but at least the method's non-destructive. But we didn't have to take samples from Stonehenge, because I'm sure you'll have heard of the story about the core that appeared from Stonehenge.
Tell us everything, David. Tell us everything.
I'll tell you it very briefly. So what basically happened was, it goes back to the 1950s, 1958, and there was a lot of conservation work done at Stonehenge. The part of that was raising stones that had fallen over in well, probably not even prehistory, in the late 1700s. And during the course of trying to raise a stone that we now call Stone 58, they basically identified a big crack running through the length of it, and decided that if they raised it upright, there was a risk it could split. So decided to pin it, which is, like you would do with a house if the walls were bowing, they would pin the stone together. So they basically raised the stone vertically, and then got a diamond drill and cored through the stone, through the whole thickness of it, in 3 places. And I know there's video footage of that happening. So,
really?
Yeah. So that's another story. The company that did the drilling came from Basingstoke. They were based in Basingstoke. Guy who was on site, so it was a drilling company, and there was also representatives from the company. It was a guy called Robert Phillips. He was basically given one of these cores by what was then the Ministry of Works, so that was the government branch that was overseeing the conservation work, and he was given it on behalf of the company, for the company. And this core, there's a beautiful, the company was so proud, it was hanging in his office. They did a watercolor of the work. So there's this absolutely beautiful watercolor of the drilling being done. And then when he retired, they gave the core and the watercolor to him. And he moved to the States. He moved around in the States, and I think he was in his late 80s. And one of his sons contacted English Heritage to say, my dad's got a core from Stonehenge. He's getting very old. Would you like it back? That was the long and short of it. And I was asked, because we were already doing the XRF work at Stonehenge by the time, would this be useful for you to look at? I know, yeah, exactly. It was like, oh my, yeah, well, yes, it would. So I had to write a little case for, why it would be useful, so that they would release the resources to fly this, freight this core back. And real game changer, because what it meant was that we could actually get samples from right inside the middle of a stone, and we didn't have to worry about surface weathering, and so we could compare fresh rock from Stonehenge with fresh rock from areas where we thought the stones might come from. And I was amazed we were given permission to sample. That was an interesting experience, because the core was held down in a big storeroom in Bath, and there was, people disappeared and there was lots of murmurings and whatever else, but we were then given permission to sample and analyse a 7 centimetre piece of this core, and it was kind of cut in half lengthways, and we took one half of that and the other half stayed, and it was that really that allowed us to do the real high resolution work, so that we could then match the stone against possible areas of Sarsens around southern England.
And that is so fortuitous. We talk
it's
a lot.
Chance, isn't it? So I'm saying about chance earlier on. It's pure chance. So we were just in the right place at the right time, I think.
Doing the right research.
Doing the right research and happening. It was kind of amusing in that when I got the email through saying about this core, the initial email was, am I right in thinking you're doing research at Stonehenge at the moment? And my immediate reaction was, oh God, what have we done wrong? And then the follow-on email explained about this. Yes, absolutely bit their hand off to get a chance to actually analyze.
That is fantastic, and as you say, fortuitous and once in a lifetime, 100-year, whatever it might be, opportunity. But Stonehenge arguably is the easier part of this discovery, this research, because you've got the monument, you've got the stones. Granted, you can't touch them with your portable XRF, but you can get close enough to get your 5 readings and sort of level out the average. And you've got this amazing opportunity with the core. Arguably, finding the quarry site is more like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yes, no, very, very much. So, and we had a grant from the British Academy to do this work, which wasn't a big grant. It was about £10,000 in total to do all this work. So we knew we wanted to sample, and we kind of had to choose sites to maximise our value for money. So our original plan was we wanted to sample quite widely across southern England, more than anything because we didn't think we would strike gold. And we wanted to see, well, can we knock some places out? Yeah, so we could say there aren't matches. So we did 6 sites in Wiltshire, so reasonably close to Stonehenge, but then the other 14 sites were spread, everywhere from Devon up to Norfolk. We had sites in Kent because there are Sarsen monuments in Kent, and there have been long suggestions that maybe the Sarsens were moved from Kent to Wiltshire. So we thought we ought to test some in the Kent area, but it was purely we were trying to kind of use that, trying to say no, it's definitely not here, and it's not here, and it's not here, in the hope that then you would hone in on a tighter area. And we wouldn't have gone to West Woods. I mean, this is another chance, another thing. We definitely knew we were going to sample at, I've mentioned Clackford Bottom and at Piggledene and Lockeridge Dean, because those are really obvious big areas of Sarsen. It wasn't until, so we were picking, we basically knew we wanted to do 6 sites in Wiltshire, and it wasn't until we're picking the last 3. I spoke to a woman called Katie Whitaker, who's at the University of Reading, and she is probably the UK Sarsen expert, particularly from historical use and archaeological use of Sarsen. And she said, oh, you really ought to go to West Woods, because she'd been doing some survey work there. And she said, why don't you do that as one of your sites? And basically, we wouldn't have gone and sampled at West Woods if it wasn't for Katie's recommendation. So there's another bit of chance in there that, had we not, had that tip off, we probably would never have gone to West Woods. And then we would be looking for, well, where's what's the closest to the mat in terms of matches, rather than actually being able to say, well, actually, we've got a direct hit here.
So when you got that direct hit, was it a question of, oh gosh, everything's going to be the same? Or did you know by then that you had this kind of background of variation among all of the sites that you could say, actually, this makes this even more likely?
No, we knew that we had the background. So so I was working with my colleague at Brighton, Jake Chiborowski, who's a real whiz geochemist, and he did a lot of the geochemical, the kind of data crunching. So we already knew that we had very, very different signatures in different places, which was good, because at least you can then say, yeah, there's enough variability that it's not chance. It's likely that you're getting different signals in different places. But it was very much, Jake basically said, I think I've got some results now. And we're looking through, and then we're going, it's like, oh my God, okay, so this could be a direct hit. Yeah. And then it was an awful lot of, please, can you check that, all these calculations and whatever are correct before we go and do this, So, so yes, it was very much, oh my goodness, and we had long discussions because if you look at the study we published, I think the weak thing in it, and it's always good to admit your weaknesses, is that we should have really probably sampled a lot more sites, but we were very limited in terms of money. So if I was critiquing it at all, I would say, well, yeah, how confident can you be? But I still think that the fact you get a direct hit and a direct match, I don't know what the odds would be of finding another direct match, given how much variability we know there is. It's possible. That's why I always say it's the most likely source based on the current evidence. But yeah, we're happy that this is it's an absolute dead match chemically. If you were doing forensics on this, you would be saying, well, yeah, that's a very strong suspect.
So I'm going to have to accept that Lawrence is right and is right to be as proud as he is of that particular site. And
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll visit as well, Lawrence. There are a couple of things, in there that I just wanted to briefly pick up on before we kind of move on to the next question. The first is, thank you for pointing out to the world, or the fairly limited amount of people that listen to Career in Ruins. Thank you for pointing out how physical science can be at times, because the perception of a scientist is kind of in a lab coat in a lab, not doing too much work. But PXRF in the outside world is absolute agony at times. To the point where a colleague of mine decided she would take photos of me in every awkward contorting position she saw me in and produced an XRF yoga guide, because it can be one of the most physically demanding bits of science I've ever done.
We were literally standing next to a large Sarsen boulder, with your arm at 90 degrees to it. And the thing that made it more challenging was it was at night, and we did, I think 2 of the days were in midwinter. So it was thick frost, and it was bitter at 2 a.m. on Salisbury Plain. Yeah, so it's not that glamorous, but yeah.
But the results are pretty decent. And the other thing you mentioned, which gives me a rare opportunity to tell a story about cores, which I don't get to do that often. It is funny enough, it doesn't come up too much in the podcast talking about opportunistic core finding. But you reminded me of a story. I was doing some work a few years back on the geology around Bath and the possible origins of some of the building stones for the Roman baths. I had a PhD student, Owen Kern, doing the work. And we really wanted some comparative material, but we couldn't really very easily go and kind of dig into mines and drill holes in stuff. It's quite a challenge. And we just wanted to have a little look to kind of see if it would work. And a dear colleague of mine, I don't know if you know him, he's a carbonate sedimentologist, a chap called Morris Tucker, got in touch and he said, I've been wandering around the town. They're doing coring all over the place at the moment, looking at where it's going to collapse. I've just been grabbing them off the side of the street. Would you like them? And again, opportunistic cores. So they're out there. Out there.
Yeah.
I'm throwing it out there. I think we've got the 2 coolest PXRFers in arguably in the world. Just for the two sites. So David with your Stonehenge PXRFing, hard to beat. But Derek with your Broomswell bucket from Sutton Hoo. I'd throw it out there to the listeners. Do you know of a cooler thing that's been PXRF'd than Stonehenge and the Sutton Hoo beautiful Anglo-Saxon burial bucket?
Write in, comment below. That's the thing, right?
Which leads on nicely, because there'll be plenty of people out there that use PXRF that will be envious of both of you for your use of science and archaeology. But David, what is it that you are envious of with regards to other people's works, discoveries, anything like that?
I think, I was thinking about this in terms of, and I wanted to talk from, say, an archaeology perspective, really. I'm really, really envious of the people who get to work with ancient DNA. Totally different to what I do, but I find it absolutely incredible that, and not so much recent DNA, although it's fascinating to know that you dug up a former king in a car park. That kind of thing is amazing when you can do that, tracing lineages through DNA. But I'm amazed that you might be able to, the concept, you can go to a Middle Stone Age site somewhere or a Paleolithic site somewhere, and the type of hominin that was living in this department. I find that incredible. So you haven't just got to look at the stone tools people left behind, but you can actually say something about the type of ancestral human, if you want to think of it in that way, that was doing that work. And I don't begin to pretend to understand how it operates, but I am super envious at being able to do that really big, connection with the past. And it's mad enough working with people who do refitting and where they are able to say, here, take this piece of stone and this piece of stone. And then you go, click, and they go back together again. And you think, well, I'm the second person who's actually done that since that stone was chipped away, and I love that that's the thing I love about archaeology, is that connection with human past, and that, so that's what I would love to do. I'm very, very envious about people who do anything to do with DNA in archaeology. Is that okay as an answer? Very different to what I do, but I am very, I do find it, I'm like, wow, what a fantastic thing to be able to do.
It's an envy I share, particularly as the kind of the ADNA discipline moves on, and people seem to be increasingly asking really, really interesting questions with it. Like some colleagues of mine recently identifying family links within a single Iron Age cemetery, and it gives a connection that I don't think there's any other way we'd ever get in archaeology. And and
that's what I think's fantastic about it. Yeah, and it is, and that whole idea that you can trace family links and you can trace intergenerational links. It still blows me away that you could look at some. I can't really call it cave dirt, because that's probably a bit of the wrong term. But you can look at the fine sediment from a cave deposit somewhere in the Middle East somewhere, and figure out that this was a particular type of hominin that was living in this from the DNA that they've shed, and it's in the sediments. That's amazing.
It is truly, truly remarkable. But so is figuring out where the stones from Stonehenge came from. So I'll give you that. Moving on to our last question then, David. As we mentioned early on, Lawrence and I have developed a time machine, which allows all of our guests to go back in time and visit a place of their choosing. The rules of time travel are fairly fluid, and you can borrow from just any Hollywood movie that has any time travel in it whatsoever to get any laws of physics and or paradox type rules. So pretty flexible. So, David, where would you like to go?
You can probably imagine, can't you? I would absolutely. So things out of our Stonehenge research that still kind of fascinate me is how quickly it was built. That's something that I find really interesting. So I would love to be in Salisbury Plain or on Salisbury Plain when these stones were moving, and just see how many were being moved and how fast they were being moved and how long it took to build this monument. Now, okay, that would involve time travel. I'd have to be there for quite a while, I would imagine, but
we've got a fast forward button. It's fine.
That would be handy. Maybe if I could do repeat visits and come back every few months, that might be a better solution. But we've got this kind of idea that perhaps because they've because all of the stones or most of the stones are coming from one area, maybe they were all moved in one great big project. It's the idea we're moving this. We're going to do this as a big event, and we're moving all of our stones from Westwoods. And I'd love to know whether that's true or not. I'd love to know which way they went. So you could test out all these ideas about least effort pathways and whatever else. I still do wonder,
all those GIS nerds.
I know, exactly. So I still think, though, if you're prepared to drag a 30-ton boulder all that distance, you might not be that worried about least effort pathways. I'd imagine you're probably going to be, you might be taking in special places. I mean, if there's other important places en route, you might well be moving it through there. But I'd love to, that's what I would love to know, and just to get in there and see the human effort and try to see whether all these, and what was it for? You know, it'd be great, wouldn't it, to be able to talk to people really about why they built it, rather than having to piece together evidence.
I had a bit of a prediction about where you go with your time machine ticket, because I was wondering if in kind of a causal loop or a temporal paradoxy kind of way, maybe it's already happened and we're seeing the results of it. I wonder if actually you're going to use your ticket to go back in time and suggest to someone when they see that broken Stonehenge stone that they need to put a massive core in it.
Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah, 1958 here. Yeah. Just drill through there, and if you
make it a bit longer,
if you can make sure don't just drill it out, but actually core it, because the obvious thing to do would be to just put a big drill bit through and make a hole. But no, if you could keep the bit that came through the middle, that would be really handy.
Perfect.
On that vein, and this may be a mean question, so feel free to duck out of it, but thinking about Stonehenge, and we think we pinned down, we're fairly comfortable we pinned down the Sarsens, but there's still a lot of debate about the Bluestone. So these are the Welsh stones that come from much further distance, and were put there much earlier than the sort of early Bronze Age sort of trilithons that were erected. There's a few arguments around that, and there's the people that would want to take the time machine and see these stones dragged, and there are people that suggest they're geological erratics. Well, as a geologist, what's your take on that?
Oh, I mean, what I would say is, I think it's quite important for fairness to say that the people who think that they're erratics are in a very, very small number.
Okay.
It's a bit like, when we talk about climate change, it's a bit like the BBC having somebody on, when 90% of people think it's a human thing, and then there's someone else who says, no, it's my Auntie Marjorie's did her laundry on a Tuesday or something like that. No, I'm not belittling the glacial argument, but as yet the evidence in the landscape in Salisbury Plain area isn't that strong, I wouldn't think. There's not evidence that the last ice sheets covered Salisbury Plain during the last two glaciations. So, quite how the erratics would have got there, I really don't know. There just isn't. I mean, what you would need, and I can't remember genuinely how many bluestones there are at Stonehenge and how many were in the monument, but it's sort of 80 odd, something like that. And what you would need would be an ice sheet that's flowing perfectly across Pembrokeshire and then heading in a kind of a southeasterly direction. It's gone right over the Preseli Hills. It's plucked out 80 plus of these very large stones, and then it's dumped them somewhere on Salisbury Plain or wherever that might be. But it hasn't left behind any other evidence. No. So it hasn't left behind lots of little bits of. If there was that much movement, genuinely, I think if a glacier was moving, lots of large boulders, there would also be lots of smaller bits. And I'm not seeing evidence for that yet in the landscape. I don't know how much people have systematically looked in detail for it, but I've not seen people describing at other archaeological sites that there's loads of bluestone fragments coming up. It's not happening. So that's the thing for me.
Oh,
so in the absence of that, I think that the human movement, is probably more plausible.
That's great. And it's nice to hear that my own musings, that I'm no expert, just based purely on logic and an A-level in geology, makes me think that, it's far more plausible that they've been moved by human influence rather than sort of an ice sheet of some kind.
I mean, it's possible, but I think the thing is that you would expect a smoking gun in the landscape, in the Stonehenge area, or at least somewhere nearby where these things must have been taken from. I'm still very much of the, genuinely, if there were 80 plus stones, you would expect an awful lot of smaller debris to move over in the ice sheet with that, unless it was purely fortuitous that,
Yeah. And they happened to find all 80 of the stones that would have been peppered around all over the place.
So I just think, so I wouldn't belittle it, but I think I'd need more evidence before, I would really kind of hold a lot of weight in it.
Yeah.
I think I'm very happy to to imagine that our prehistoric ancestors were very capable of moving rocks over great distances. I think that's something humans could do in the past, and I'm quite
and they do it
comfortable
now,
with that.
don't they? There's anthropological work showing that people move absolutely enormous boulders over long distances. So yeah, I don't see why not.
Are we sure it wasn't aliens?
Don't. We're going to have an Ancient Aliens and Stargate special at some point soon.
Oh,
we need to discuss.
We didn't talk about that. It's coming back.
We'll have a Stargate special.
Okay, cool. Sorry, David. Got too excited there. David, thank you so much for joining us this evening for your career in ruins, and for giving us insight into your incredible research, for demonstrating that you don't have to be an archaeologist to be working in archaeology. And I mean, you clearly are an archaeologist now, but certainly origins of geological research, and it's been fascinating. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks ever so much.
And thanks. You. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our patrons. Thank you for all the lovely support messages we got during the awards ceremony. I think the good wishes beforehand and the unluckies and chin-ups afterwards went a very long way to making us feel appreciated and making us want to do more career in ruins. And thank you to the Council for British Archaeology for shortlisting us.
One last thank you to that fellow guest and nominee who came up and said hello to us at the awards. It was lovely to see you and meet you.
Yes, absolutely. Some fantastic early careers people there that we got to chat to as well. For now, we'll see you on the next podcast.